It all happened in an instant, though the tension had been building for months. 1 second, the world thought Prince Harry was still a member of the royal family with all the privileges, titles, and public adoration that came with being the Duke of Sussex. The next, the announcement shook not only Buckingham Palace but the entire world. King Charles III had stripped Prince Harry of all his royal titles and removed him entirely from the line of succession. The words echoed across newsrooms, social media feeds, and living rooms around the globe, leaving millions speechless. How could it happen? What did Harry do that pushed his father to take such an unprecedented step? And perhaps the most burning question of all, what does this mean for the future of the British monarchy and for Harry himself? Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. The shock of the news cannot be overstated. Royals are no strangers to drama, to scandals, to whispers in the halls of palaces that make headlines around the world. But to completely erase a son from the line of succession, to strip him of his noble titles, to publicly declare that he is no longer part of the framework that has defined him for his entire life, it is unprecedented in modern British history. Think about it. Harry, who was once the golden boy of the monarchy, celebrated by millions for his humanitarian work, his charm, and his rebellious yet endearing spirit, suddenly cast into the shadows of history, a cautionary tale rather than a celebrated prince. And the timing? Oh, the timing could not have been more explosive. Only weeks ago, Harry had been seen attending high-profile events, mingling with celebrities, talking openly about his life with Meghan Markle. Now he faced the very real possibility that those appearances, those words, and perhaps even those decisions behind closed doors had sealed his fate. And yet, the world is not being told everything. There are whispers, rumors, and leaks that suggest this story is far deeper than a father punishing a son for public missteps. There are private conversations, urgent meetings, and secret correspondences that may reveal a palace divided, a family fractured, and decisions made that would reverberate far beyond the gilded walls of Buckingham Palace. What really drove King Charles III to act in such a drastic manner? Was it merely a response to Harry's public statements, or were there forces behind the scenes, advisors pulling strings, influencing the monarch in ways the public cannot yet see? What secrets lie in the letters, the emails, the whispered phone calls that could shed light on this shocking royal maneuver? And why now? Why this exact moment in history, when Harry's actions had been scrutinized for years, but only now reached the breaking point? From the very start, Harry's life has been one of immense privilege, but also enormous pressure. He grew up under the glare of constant media scrutiny, every action dissected, every misstep amplified. He navigated the delicate balance between tradition and modernity, a royal who wanted to serve, yet also longed for independence, for autonomy, for the freedom to make his own choices without being shackled to protocol. His marriage to Meghan Markle, a woman from outside the royal circle, was seen as a bold declaration of modern love, but it also ignited a firestorm of controversy. Was it love, or was it a threat to the old guard? Did their outspoken interviews and public statements about mental health, family tensions, and royal life cross a line that could not be ignored? Or was there more, something hidden, a revelation not yet disclosed, that pushed the king to act decisively and publicly? Imagine, for a moment, what it must have been like inside the palace when the decision was made. The whispers that filled the corridors, the aides nervously checking messages, the royal advisors scrambling to manage the fallout. Each phone call, each conversation carried immense weight, knowing that the announcement would not just affect Harry, but ripple through the entire royal structure. One can almost hear the tension in the air. Advisors debating strategy, legal experts reviewing precedents, and the king weighing the balance between public perception and familial loyalty. It is a delicate dance. One wrong step could trigger backlash, scandal, or worse, distrust that could fracture the monarchy itself. And in the midst of it all stands Harry, whose very identity, his role in the family, and his place in history were being redefined in real time, publicly, irrevocably. And the implications are massive. Without his titles, without his place in the line of succession, Harry's life changes overnight. The privileges that he has known since birth, the security, the influence, even the perception of legitimacy, are suddenly gone. What does he do now? How does he navigate a world that once revered him, that once positioned him as a royal role model, and now views him as someone on the outside looking in? Will he fight back publicly, using his voice, his media connections, and his global platform to challenge the decision? Or will he retreat, quietly reassess, and attempt to rebuild his life in a world that suddenly feels less familiar, less welcoming? And how will Meghan Markle respond, now confronted with a situation that could redefine not just their lives, but their legacy in the eyes of the public? While the public reels from shock, insiders hint at an even more complex story. There are rumors of private meetings between senior royals, conversations that were never meant to be leaked, and notes passed between aides that reveal a tense, fragile, and divided family. Even within the palace, loyalty is fractured. Some support the king's decision, seeing it as necessary to preserve tradition, protocol, and authority. Others quietly question whether the move is fair, whether it could ignite a public relations disaster, or whether it may backfire spectacularly. And then there is the media, ready to pounce on every detail, every leak, every expression from the family members involved. How do you maintain control in a world where information spreads faster than the palace can respond, where social media amplifies rumors into perceived truth, and where the audience is hungry for every dramatic twist? And speaking of the public, the reaction has been immediate and intense. From international headlines to Twitter threads to late-night television commentary, everyone has an opinion. Some celebrate the king's decisive action, calling it a long-overdue correction. Others condemn it as harsh, cruel, or even politically motivated. Polls suggest that public sentiment is divided, mirroring the internal divisions of the royal family itself. But what is striking is the intensity of the emotions involved. Loyalty, betrayal, disappointment, shock, all swirl together in a complex tapestry that reflects both the human and the institutional stakes. This is more than a family drama. It is a story about power, influence, responsibility, and the consequences of choices made in the public eye. And the timing could not be more dramatic. Only days ago, Harry and Meghan were attending high-profile events, meeting celebrities, engaging with humanitarian projects, and appearing in interviews. Suddenly, everything changes. A life once mapped by tradition and expectation is now uncertain, unpredictable, and fraught with challenges that even Harry may not fully understand yet. What does it mean for his titles, his role in charities, his security, and his public persona? How will this shift affect his children, his family relationships, and the delicate balance of the monarchy as a whole? And perhaps most importantly, what does it reveal about the internal dynamics of the royal family, the influence of advisors, and the pressures that even the most privileged individuals face when tradition, public opinion, and personal desire collide? And as we dig deeper into this story, it becomes clear that there is more beneath the surface than the public eye has seen. There are questions that demand answers. What exactly triggered the king's decision? Was it a single event, a series of actions, or years of tension culminating in this unprecedented move? Are there documents, emails, or secret correspondences that will shed light on what really happened? And how will Harry respond? Quietly, publicly, or with a move that no one sees coming? The intrigue, the drama, the emotional intensity of this moment cannot be overstated. And just when you think you understand the story, new layers emerge, new secrets appear, and the narrative becomes even more complicated and gripping. By the end of this hour, we will uncover the full scope of the fallout, the private battles that shaped this decision, and the global impact of a royal move that will be remembered for decades. But right now, as the dust begins to settle and the headlines continue to flash across screens worldwide, the story remains unfinished. What came next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. Could you imagine being in the palace at that moment? The announcement had barely been made, and already the air inside Buckingham Palace was electric. Phones were ringing off the hook. Secretaries were rushing up and down corridors with urgent messages. Aides huddled together, whispering, scanning each other for clues about what the king would do next. Some looked nervous, others confused. And the walls themselves seemed to hum with tension, the weight of history pressing down on everyone inside. One thing was clear: this was not a minor decision. This was seismic. It shook the monarchy to its very foundation. The first whispers leaked to the press within minutes. News outlets scrambled. Headlines flashed across screens worldwide. Prince Harry stripped of titles, Duke of Sussex removed from succession, royal family in crisis. The shockwaves weren't just in the UK. Across continents, people stopped, stared, and tried to make sense of the unthinkable. How could a father remove his son in such a definitive, public manner? And what exactly had led to this moment? Inside the palace, the reaction was immediate and chaotic. Imagine the scene. Staff members, who had spent decades navigating the careful balance between secrecy and duty, suddenly faced an event that no protocol could fully cover. Some whispered that the decision had been in the works for months, perhaps even a year. Others suggested it was a spur-of-the-moment reaction to a series of events that the public would never see. Tensions ran high. Senior aides argued quietly in corners. Legal advisors debated the ramifications in hushed tones. The mood was tense, electric, and almost unbearable. Harry himself was somewhere inside, though details about his exact location were scarce. Reports suggested he had been notified privately, but the world had already seen the public statement. One has to ask, what was going through his mind at that moment? Shock, anger, betrayal, or a mix of all three? And what did Meghan feel, knowing that everything they had built together, titles, security, legacy, could suddenly vanish in a single stroke? Could she have anticipated this? And if so, had she advised him? Or was she as blindsided as the rest of the world? Some staff tried to contain the situation, moving quickly to manage communications. But containment proved impossible. Within an hour, the palace grounds were swarming with journalists, photographers, and cameramen. Every official statement, every hint of movement was scrutinized, photographed, and broadcast in real time. The gates that usually signified royal privacy were now gateways to chaos. And for Harry, it was not just the titles he lost. It was the sense of identity and security that came with them. Titles, for royals, are more than names. They are symbols of responsibility, privilege, and belonging. To strip them away publicly is to declare, in effect, that a person no longer belongs in that world. Rumors began to swirl. Some suggested that Harry had crossed a line in recent interviews, speaking openly about family disputes, mental health struggles, and his perception of the monarchy in ways that the king could not forgive. Others hinted at disagreements over public appearances, charitable initiatives, and even security arrangements. Was this about one explosive interview, or a series of actions and perceived slights that built up over years? Some aides whispered that the king had finally decided that private disagreements were no longer private. They were threats to the institution itself. But here's the thing. The palace has a history of secrecy, of burying conflicts before they reach the public eye. To act so openly, so definitively, suggests that the king wanted the world to know that this was not merely a personal decision, but a statement about the monarchy's authority. And yet, the contradictions were striking. While some members of the family reportedly supported the move, others were said to be quietly appalled. Could Charles really risk such internal dissent for the sake of public image? Was there a point where loyalty to the institution outweighed loyalty to family? Or was this a carefully calculated move designed to assert control while minimizing public outrage? Across social media, the response was instantaneous. Hashtags erupted, debates ignited, and commentary flooded timelines. Was Harry a victim of his own choices, or a scapegoat for larger issues within the royal family? The global public had opinions, but even they did not know the full story. What leaked documents hinted at, what insiders suggested, and what the king privately decided, these layers would take weeks, if not months, to fully unravel. And in the meantime, speculation alone threatened to define the narrative. Sources inside Buckingham Palace revealed that the king had consulted closely with senior advisors before making the announcement. Some accounts described tense, late-night meetings in the quietest wings of the palace, discussions that were supposedly off-limits to even the most trusted aides. Legal experts were brought in to evaluate the wording of the official statement to ensure it would have the maximum impact and clarity. Strategy meetings considered every possible scenario: public backlash, media scrutiny, even international diplomatic reactions. Every detail mattered. The king was not acting impulsively. This was calculated, deliberate, and designed to send a clear message to Harry, to the family, and to the world. Yet, in the midst of all this planning, chaos reigned. Palace staff described a surreal scene. Assistants carrying stacks of papers, security personnel doubling their patrols, couriers rushing messages across the halls. The air was thick with anxiety, whispered arguments, and the unmistakable hum of history in the making. And at the center of it all, Harry's absence, or presence, was a mystery. Where was he? What was he thinking? And how would he respond when the full weight of the public and private implications hit him? Observers outside the palace had their own theories. Some suggested that this was the culmination of years of tension between father and son, exacerbated by media coverage, public statements, and the couple's outspoken advocacy. Others believed there might be more, some kind of undisclosed controversy or secret misstep that forced the king's hand. And perhaps most tantalizing of all, could this decision ripple further, affecting Meghan, the children, or even other members of the family? The uncertainty was palpable, and the palace's silence only fueled the speculation. But what really made the announcement so extraordinary wasn't just the stripping of titles. It was the removal from the line of succession, the very thing that defines a royal. To remove Harry from succession is to erase his future role in the monarchy, to declare that he will never, under any circumstances, ascend to the throne or serve as an heir. That is not just a personal blow. It is an institutional one, a declaration that the family hierarchy will be reshaped and that Harry, no matter his previous achievements or contributions, is now outside the system entirely. And in the kingdom where tradition is law and history weighs heavily on every decision, this is nothing short of a revolution. The reaction from the rest of the family, insiders claim, was immediate but complex. Some were said to be relieved, seeing it as a way to resolve ongoing tensions. Others were reportedly horrified, believing the move was unnecessarily harsh, even cruel. And in the background, advisors whispered about the next steps, the potential for public statements, and how Harry might respond. Would he issue a public declaration? Would he retreat in a private life? Or would he strike back, using the media and his global platform to challenge the king in ways that could shake the monarchy even further? And while the palace attempted to project control and calm, the reality was far messier. Staff struggled to manage the constant flow of questions from journalists. Legal teams worked around the clock to anticipate possible challenges. Security teams were on high alert, ensuring that the sudden public attention did not turn into chaos. And somewhere, just beyond the cameras and headlines, Harry and Meghan were left to grapple with the consequences of a decision that had been made in their absence, or so it seemed. What came next was almost unimaginable. As the world digested the news, the palace prepared for the fallout that had been predicted but could never be fully contained. Every move, every statement, every gesture would now be scrutinized, dissected, and judged. And while the announcement itself made headlines, insiders hinted that there was far more to the story. A series of private conversations, secret memos, and perhaps even undisclosed conflicts that would emerge over time. What happened behind closed doors might change everything we thought we knew about the royal family, about Harry, and about the very institution of monarchy itself. But just when it seemed that the shock had reached its peak, whispers began to circulate about a document, an internal memorandum, allegedly leaked, that suggested the king's decision was not just about protocol or tradition. It hinted at something more personal, something that could rewrite the narrative entirely. Could this be the proof of long-standing grievances? Or a revelation that would cast Harry's actions in a new, even more controversial light? The palace was bracing for impact, the world was holding its breath, and the story was far from over. And just as the first day of global reaction was settling, insiders hinted at yet another twist. A private meeting had been scheduled between Harry and a senior royal advisor. What was discussed remains unclear, but reports suggest it could change everything about the story we think we know. What was said in that room? Did Harry accept the decision, or did he prepare to fight back? And could this meeting set the stage for a confrontation that might rock the royal family like never before? The tension is palpable, and the questions only multiply. The first chapter of this story is ending, but the drama is only beginning. What came next, insiders claim, would change the trajectory of the monarchy, the perception of Harry in the public eye, and perhaps even the very structure of royal authority. And no one, neither the staff, the media, nor the public, was fully prepared for what would happen next. Could anyone have predicted that Prince Harry, once the golden boy of the monarchy, would find himself at the center of such an unprecedented royal upheaval? From the moment he was born, the public was captivated by his every move. The second son of Princess Diana and Prince Charles, Harry carried with him not just the legacy of the crown, but also the weight of one of the most scrutinized family lines in the world. Cameras followed him everywhere. Paparazzi swarmed his footsteps from the nursery to school to public events. Every smile, every frown, every gesture was cataloged, analyzed, and amplified. He grew up under a microscope, a life that few could even imagine, let alone endure. As a child, he was known as the mischievous prince, the one who dared to push boundaries while still maintaining the charm that would endear him to the public. Diana's influence was profound. She sought to raise Harry to be compassionate, socially conscious, and independent-minded. And for years, he seemed to live up to that vision. But life in the spotlight is never simple. Early on, he faced trauma and tragedy that would shape his path. The death of his mother when he was just 12 left an indelible mark, a wound that never fully healed and one that the public could witness, scrutinize, and interpret in real time. Did this grief fuel his rebellious streak? Did it contribute to decisions that later infuriated the monarchy? By the time he reached adulthood, Harry had become a figure the public adored, an energetic, empathetic, yet occasionally reckless prince, often portrayed in stark contrast to his elder brother William, the heir apparent, whose image was more measured, controlled, and traditional. Harry represented a different side of royalty, one that was relatable, that occasionally bent the rules, that engaged directly with global audiences in ways that felt modern and approachable. And for a while, that image served him well. Charitable work, public appearances, and military service cemented his reputation as someone who could bridge the old traditions of royalty with the evolving expectations of a global audience. Then came the turning point, or perhaps a series of turning points. Public opinion, once universally favorable, began to shift. Every choice, every interview, every media appearance was now a potential minefield. Some perceived Harry as a rebel hero, others as a reckless troublemaker. Each step outside the traditional boundaries of royal conduct was dissected for meaning. Why did he speak out about mental health? Why did he challenge the palace's stance on certain charities? Why did he marry Meghan Markle, a woman outside the aristocracy, and take on a public persona that sometimes seemed deliberately at odds with protocol? The contradictions were stark. The public admired his candor, yet questioned his judgment. The palace tolerated his independence, but also seemed increasingly concerned about his influence and the potential for scandal. The marriage to Meghan Markle was both a triumph and a turning point. On one hand, it was a union celebrated around the world. On the other, it became a flashpoint for controversy. Meghan, as an outsider, faced intense scrutiny, and by extension, so did Harry. Their interviews, philanthropic efforts, and public statements were amplified, dissected, and often distorted. The tension between loyalty to family and the desire for autonomy grew, creating a fault line that few could cross without consequences. Could Harry have navigated this differently? Or was he trapped by circumstances, by public expectation, by the weight of history itself? Every royal milestone, from tours abroad to charity initiatives to family gatherings, now carried double meaning. Did Harry attend because he wanted to serve? Or because he felt obligated to maintain appearances? Was he motivated by genuine compassion or by the desire to assert independence? These contradictions became impossible to ignore. Each action, each word, each gesture was interpreted as either rebellious or reckless. And with every misstep, the pressure mounted, not just from the palace, but from the media, the public, and even friends who sometimes offered advice that came with consequences. The narrative of Harry as a beloved prince slowly shifted into something more complicated. Public scrutiny intensified. Rumors of disputes with William, disagreements with senior royal staff, and private grievances began to circulate. Some suggested that Harry's behavior was a direct challenge to tradition, a test of how much the monarchy could bend before breaking. Others hinted at personal frustrations, feeling constrained by protocol, frustrated by media narratives, and increasingly at odds with the very institution he had been born into. The contradictions were striking. a prince who sought to serve but found service constraining, a public figure who wanted transparency but faced constant intrusion, a son who loved his father yet clashed with him in ways that would ultimately lead to a dramatic rupture. And yet, even as tensions built, Harry continued to navigate public life with charisma and energy. He launched charitable initiatives, supported veterans, advocated for mental health, and attended international events. Each move was a balancing act, a tightrope walk between public expectation and personal desire. Could he have handled it differently? Perhaps. Could he have avoided conflict? Possibly. But the pressures he faced were unlike anything most people could imagine. Every decision carried weight, every statement had repercussions, and the margin for error was vanishingly small. The tipping point, insiders suggest, was a combination of public actions and private decisions that clashed with the expectations of the monarchy. Interviews that revealed intimate family dynamics, public criticisms of the institution, and choices that seemed to prioritize personal freedom over protocol all contributed to a growing perception. Harry had stepped beyond the bounds of what the royal family could tolerate. And once that perception solidified in the minds of decision-makers, the path toward the unprecedented action by King Charles III became inevitable. But it wasn't just about public perception. There were also whispers of private conflicts, of disagreements behind closed doors that fueled frustration and resentment. Some sources claim Harry had repeatedly requested changes to traditional arrangements, challenged long-standing protocols, and questioned decisions in ways that made senior family members uncomfortable. Was this rebellion youthful idealism, or a deliberate assertion of independence? And perhaps most importantly, did it cross a line that even love, loyalty, and history could not repair? For the public, it may seem sudden, the stripping of titles, the removal from succession, but insiders argue that it had been brewing for years. Each interview, each tour, each public statement was a brick in the foundation of a crisis that could no longer be ignored. And yet, even with all the tension and speculation, no one expected the announcement to arrive in such a definitive and public way. Imagine, for a moment, Harry in those final private moments before the public statement. What was going through his mind? Fear, disbelief, anger, sorrow? Did he anticipate the magnitude of the announcement, or did it land like a thunderclap, leaving him scrambling to process the reality of losing everything he had known about his role, his identity, and his place in history? And what about Meghan? Did she see it coming, or was she blindsided alongside him, forced to confront a new reality that threatened everything they had built together? Even as the palace attempted to maintain an image of calm, the fallout was immediate and relentless. Journalists, commentators, and analysts dissected every detail. Social media exploded with speculation, opinion, and outrage. Public opinion became a battlefield, with some supporting the king's decision and others condemning it as harsh or even cruel. Every headline, every tweet, every commentary piece added to the pressure, creating a perfect storm of scrutiny and tension that could not be avoided. And yet, through all the chaos, one question remained at the center of it all. What does this mean for Harry's future? Without titles, without succession, and without the security of the institution, he faces a world of uncertainty. Will he retreat, rebrand, or strike back? Will he challenge the monarchy publicly or seek reconciliation privately? And perhaps most intriguing of all, what private strategies, alliances, or plans might he have been developing in secret to respond to the most dramatic shift in his life? Some insiders hint at hidden dimensions to the story: letters, emails, and private conversations that may reveal tensions and grievances previously unseen. Could these documents shed light on the true reasons behind the king's decision? And more importantly, could they predict Harry's next move, a move that could either restore his place in history or solidify his exile forever? Harry's journey from beloved duke to disgraced royal is more than a personal story. It is a reflection of a monarchy grappling with modernity, tradition, and the limits of loyalty. It is a tale of a man who sought to balance duty with desire, freedom with responsibility, love with loyalty, and ultimately found that some of these forces cannot coexist without conflict. And as the world watches, one question looms larger than all the rest. How will Harry respond? Will he rise, retreat, or rebel in ways that could reshape the narrative entirely? The answer remains uncertain, but one thing is clear. The story is far from over, and the next chapter promises revelations that could change everything we thought we knew about Prince Harry, the monarchy, and the fragile balance between family and duty. The next moments, insiders warn, will be crucial, because what comes next isn't just about titles or succession. It's about power, influence, and the future of one of the most famous families in the world. And no one, not the palace, not the public, not even Harry himself, is fully prepared for what is about to unfold. Could Meghan Markle have been the catalyst that pushed the monarchy to the edge? Was she a supportive partner navigating a hostile institution, or an instigator whose presence and actions upset the delicate balance of the royal family? From the moment she entered Harry's life, Meghan's impact was undeniable. She wasn't just another royal bride. She was a woman from outside the aristocracy, a Hollywood actress, a global personality with her own platform, voice, and ideas. That combination, which should have been celebrated for modernizing the monarchy, instead became a source of controversy and tension that may have contributed directly to the events that led to Harry losing his titles and position in the line of succession. From their first public appearances together, Meghan drew attention. Some adored her. Others were immediately suspicious. The press painted her as glamorous, sophisticated, and politically aware. But rumors and whispers began to circulate quickly. Was she too outspoken? Too independent? Too influential over Harry? Some palace insiders allegedly viewed her as a threat, a disruptor who could reshape the monarchy in ways they weren't ready for. And in the early days of their marriage, those suspicions seemed to escalate as Meghan adjusted to the intense scrutiny and, in turn, made choices that were seen as bold, defiant, or unconventional. The relationship itself was under constant observation. Every smile, every glance, every word of affection or disagreement between Harry and Meghan was analyzed by media outlets, dissected by social commentators, and sometimes distorted to suit a narrative. Was Meghan exerting influence over Harry, or was Harry making independent decisions and she simply happened to be by his side? The lines were blurred, and the palace, the public, and the press often struggled to distinguish personal decisions from political or institutional implications. It didn't help that Meghan brought with her a perspective shaped by a career in Hollywood, a world with very different rules, very different expectations, and very different methods of managing image and influence. She was accustomed to media strategy, global messaging, and the subtle art of storytelling. In the context of the monarchy, however, those skills could be perceived as manipulation, ambition, or, in some cases, defiance. And insiders whispered that her involvement in certain interviews, charitable initiatives, and public statements may have amplified tensions within the family, particularly when she and Harry seemed to challenge or bypass established protocols. Some suggest that Meghan's biggest influence came not through overt actions, but through the subtle ways she shaped Harry's decisions. Reports hint at private conversations where she may have encouraged Harry to speak out on issues he previously would have handled quietly. Was it empowerment? Or was it an underestimation of how far the palace would tolerate public dissent? And when combined with Harry's growing frustrations with royal restrictions, the two forces, his desire for independence and her push for agency, may have created a perfect storm that led to the breaking point. The controversies began mounting publicly with interviews, charitable initiatives, and statements that challenged the traditional image of the monarchy. Meghan's voice was amplified, sometimes overshadowing Harry's, leading some observers to speculate about the dynamic in their relationship. Who was guiding whom? Was Meghan leading Harry toward confrontation, or was he making his own calculated decisions with her support? The ambiguity only fueled speculation, giving the media a narrative that Meghan was either a controlling influence or a victim navigating a rigid, unforgiving system. The tension between Meghan and the palace is a story of contrasts. On one hand, she was praised for her humanitarian work, her fashion sense, her commitment to causes such as mental health and gender equality. On the other, she was criticized for perceived missteps in protocol, her handling of media interactions, and the way she challenged long-standing traditions. For the royal family, which thrives on image, discipline, and a strict adherence to convention, such contradictions were destabilizing. Meghan was a disruptor by nature, and disruption in an institution built on centuries of order and hierarchy rarely comes without friction. Insiders hint that some of the most significant conflicts occurred behind closed doors. Meetings that were meant to resolve disagreements allegedly became arenas of tension and argument. Royal aides reportedly found themselves caught in the middle, forced to navigate loyalties between the couple and the crown. Some sources suggest that Meghan's approach to advocacy and communication directly influenced decisions that Harry made, whether it was about media engagements, charity projects, or public statements. And when combined with the intense media scrutiny, even small disagreements could escalate into crises that felt catastrophic to those involved. The media played a role too. Meghan's every move was dissected and interpreted, often unfairly. Headlines alternated between adulation and vilification, creating an environment where public perception was a constant pressure. Could Harry separate his feelings for Meghan from the overwhelming scrutiny they faced as a couple? Or was the combination of love, loyalty, and external pressure too intense to manage? The answer remains unclear, but the consequences are visible. The stripping of Harry's titles may have been the culmination of a series of events that began with the way he and Meghan chose to engage with the world. There were also alleged tensions between Meghan and other members of the family. Some sources suggest disagreements with William and Kate, occasional friction with Queen Elizabeth II before her passing, and a challenging relationship with advisors who saw her as a disruptive force. Was she intentionally challenging the status quo, or was she simply asserting herself in a system that rarely allowed women, particularly outsiders, to have a voice? The palace, steeped in centuries of tradition, may have viewed assertiveness as confrontation and influence as manipulation. And yet, it is impossible to ignore the loyalty Harry displayed to Meghan throughout. He consistently defended her in public statements, interviews, and appearances, often risking backlash from both media and family. That loyalty, while admirable, may have compounded the palace's concerns. To some, it looked like a power couple operating outside the expected boundaries of royal conduct. To others, it was a genuine expression of love and partnership under extraordinary circumstances. The line between personal choice and institutional expectation blurred to the point where crisis seemed inevitable. But what really fueled speculation was the combination of private strategy and public visibility. Meghan's adeptness at managing both meant that the couple could project unity, strength, and purpose, but it also made them highly visible targets. Every decision was scrutinized, every interview dissected, every gesture magnified. And when combined with historical tensions between Harry and his father, the stage was set for an unprecedented confrontation. Could the palace tolerate this degree of autonomy, independence, and influence? Clearly, the answer was no. Some insiders even hint at the tipping point, a series of private communications, perhaps letters or emails, that revealed frustrations, perceived slights, or criticisms of the monarchy. Whether these were real or exaggerated, they were allegedly enough to tip the scales. For Charles, who had spent decades managing the balance between family, public expectation, and institutional stability, the decision to strip Harry of his titles may have been fueled by both frustration and a desire to assert control. Meghan's presence and influence, visible and behind the scenes, likely played a role in the timing and severity of that decision. So what does this mean for Meghan? Is she a villain in this narrative, or a partner caught in the crossfire? Public opinion remains divided. Some see her as a modernizing force, advocating for causes and independence in an institution that often resists change. Others view her as a disruptor whose presence contributed to a rupture within the royal family. And for Harry, her role is inextricably linked to his current predicament. Could he have acted differently without her influence? Or did the loyalty and love he felt compel him toward choices that ultimately provoked his father's unprecedented response? The answers are complicated, layered, and, in many ways, still unfolding. What is clear is that Meghan's presence in Harry's life reshaped not only his path, but also the dynamics of the monarchy itself. Whether seen as supportive, provocative, or a mix of both, her influence is undeniable. And as the world waits to see how Harry responds, insiders suggest that her role in his future decisions may be just as pivotal. And just when it seemed that the drama had reached its peak, a new twist emerged. Sources claim that Meghan may have initiated a private strategy session with senior advisors, plotting the couple's next public move, an initiative that could either mend the rupture with the monarchy or escalate tensions even further. What they discussed, who was involved, and what the immediate implications might be remain shrouded in secrecy. But insiders hint that this could be the moment that decides the couple's future trajectory. The stage is set, the players are in motion, and the story is far from over. The next chapter promises to uncover the legal implications, the succession challenges, and the behind-the-scenes maneuvering that will shape Harry's, and perhaps Meghan's, future forever. What does it truly mean to lose a royal title and a place in the line of succession? On the surface, it sounds straightforward. A prince is no longer a duke, and his name is erased from the list of heirs. But the reality is far more complicated, layered with centuries of tradition, legal nuance, and institutional precedent. Every word, every decision, every formal declaration carries weight beyond the individual. It has ramifications for the monarchy, the public, and even international law. For Prince Harry, the consequences are not just symbolic. They are deeply practical, potentially reshaping his entire future, from finances to security to personal identity. To understand the gravity, one must first consider what a royal title represents. The Duke of Sussex is not just a name. It is authority, responsibility, and privilege codified by law and history. It conveys the right to certain honors, access to ceremonial functions, and an acknowledgement of one's place within a centuries-old hierarchy. Stripping that title is akin to severing the cord that connects an individual to a lineage, an institution, and the privileges afforded by birth. And in Harry's case, it is compounded by the removal from the line of succession, effectively cutting him off from any future claim to the throne, no matter how unforeseen circumstances might evolve. But the legal implications don't stop there. Insiders suggest that the palace consulted extensively with constitutional experts before announcing the decision. There are layers of legislation, precedent, and royal protocol that govern the removal of titles, and while the monarch has discretion, it is never exercised lightly. The process likely involved legal counsel reviewing decades of royal decrees, letters patent, and historical instances where titles were revoked. Yet, modern precedent for a living royal being removed from succession is virtually non-existent, making this action even more dramatic and legally significant. The letters patent, for example, which formally create and define royal titles, are precise documents. They delineate the scope of privileges, duties, and inheritance. Stripping a title isn't as simple as issuing a statement. It requires legal clarity to ensure that the action is binding and cannot easily be contested. In Harry's case, the revocation also affects his spouse and heirs. What does this mean for Meghan Markle? What does this mean for Archie and Lilibet? The ripple effect is vast, touching financial provisions, official security arrangements, and ceremonial roles that were once guaranteed by their association with Harry's title. Succession, too, is a legal quagmire. The line of succession is codified not only by tradition but by formal statutes such as the Act of Settlement 1701 and subsequent amendments, including changes made to allow equal primogeniture. Each removal or addition must comply with these rules to maintain legitimacy. By excising Harry from succession, the monarchy has set a precedent that could be referenced for future crises, potentially impacting distant relatives or other members who might challenge the king's authority. It raises questions about the extent of royal discretion and whether such a move could be contested in courts or through parliamentary review. Beyond titles and succession, the legal ramifications extend to finances and security. As a working royal, Harry previously had access to funds from the Duchy of Cornwall, security services, and official expenses. Stripped of his titles and succession rights, these benefits are in question. How much does he retain? What is still available privately versus what is withdrawn by decree? Sources suggest that negotiations were likely intense and confidential, as legal and financial advisors assessed the balance between public optics and personal security. For someone accustomed to protection and privilege, the sudden recalibration of resources and authority is not just symbolic. It is real, tangible, and disruptive. Security is another crucial dimension. With his titles gone, Harry's official status as a protected royal is under review. Security is not merely ceremonial. It is a practical necessity given the threats that come with his high-profile life. Does he maintain palace-level protection, or is it reduced? If so, to what degree? These questions have profound implications for both him and Meghan, especially as they navigate public appearances, travel, and advocacy work. The removal of official status can trigger vulnerabilities, both legally and physically, leaving the couple to reassess how they move through the world. The legal complexity is compounded by international considerations. Harry and Meghan live across borders, often in jurisdictions that may not fully recognize British titles or royal status. How do foreign authorities view the revocation of titles? Does it affect visas, taxation, or diplomatic privileges? While the monarchy's decisions are primarily domestic, the global profile of Harry and Meghan ensures that every action resonates far beyond the UK. The law may be clear in London, but the implications echo worldwide, creating a web of questions that are only beginning to be answered. Historical precedent provides some context, though it is sparse. Past instances of title removal or exclusion from succession were rare, often tied to political rebellion, illegitimacy, or marriage outside approved circles. Few modern royals have faced such definitive and public actions. The rarity underscores the extraordinary nature of King Charles III's decision. Experts argue that it may redefine expectations for royal conduct and family accountability in the 21st century. But the uncertainty also opens the door to challenges, speculation, and further internal tension. Even more intriguing are the rumored private agreements that may have accompanied this decision. Sources hint at non-disclosure agreements, conditional settlements, or private understandings designed to prevent public confrontation. Were these put in place to manage the optics, protect the institution, or ensure compliance with the king's wishes? And if so, how binding are they? Could Harry later challenge them, either legally or through the media, to regain some measure of authority or recognition? The answers remain murky, but the potential for conflict is immense. The legal web is not isolated from personal relationships. Royal advisors reportedly warned the king that removing Harry from succession could create long-term familial rifts. A son estranged from the crown has consequences not only for public image, but also for relationships with siblings, cousins, and the broader royal network. The king had to weigh the institutional necessity against the emotional cost, a decision that may reverberate for decades. And insiders suggest that every step, from legal review to final decree, was calculated with precision, yet carried the risk of unforeseen consequences. Yet, despite the legality of the move, the symbolism cannot be ignored. Titles are deeply tied to identity. Succession is about legacy. By removing Harry from both, the monarchy is making a statement about loyalty, authority, and the boundaries of family privilege. The legal and emotional layers are intertwined, creating a situation where every legal action also carries profound human impact. How does one navigate the collision of law, tradition, and personal consequence in such a high-stakes environment? That question looms over every palace corridor, every meeting, and every decision yet to come. The situation also raises questions about precedent and future implications. If a modern royal can be stripped of titles and succession rights, what does that mean for others who might challenge the institution or act outside expected norms? Is this a warning to the current generation and those that follow, a demonstration of absolute control? And if so, how will public perception shape the monarchy's authority moving forward? Will supporters applaud the decisiveness, or will critics argue that it undermines the family's image of stability, compassion, and unity? Finally, there is the human element. Legal frameworks, statutes, and precedent provide structure, but they cannot account for emotion, grief, or personal loss. Harry is no longer just a royal. He is a man stripped of privilege, facing a public, legal, and familial reckoning simultaneously. Every calculation, every clause, every conditional agreement is now intertwined with heartbreak, anger, and uncertainty. And as the palace prepares for the aftermath, the story is far from finished. Because while the law provides structure, it does not dictate response. Harry's next moves, his potential challenges, and the personal strategies he and Meghan may implement are as unpredictable as they are consequential. And insiders hint that another layer of complication is about to emerge. something that could test the boundaries of legality, family loyalty, and public perception in ways that no one yet anticipates. What comes next will not just test Harry, it will test the monarchy itself. The legal foundation may be solid, but the human and political consequences are only beginning to unfold. The next chapter promises to reveal secret meetings, palace maneuvering, and the personal fallout that will ultimately define the future of one of the world's most famous families. Who was really pulling the strings behind the scenes at Buckingham Palace when King Charles III made the unprecedented decision to strip Prince Harry of his titles and remove him from the line of succession? Was it purely the king's initiative, a personal vendetta, or were there unseen advisors, counselors, and palace insiders quietly shaping the outcome long before the public ever heard a word? In the days and weeks leading up to the announcement, the palace was reportedly a hive of secrecy, tension, and strategic maneuvering, a place where every conversation mattered, every whisper was monitored, and every misstep could tip the balance of history. Insiders claimed that the first signals of action began months, possibly even a year before the official statement. Meetings that appeared routine were anything but. Advisors, legal experts, and senior courtiers gathered in secluded wings of the palace, poring over private correspondence, reviewing past interviews, and debating the implications of Harry and Meghan's choices. Some meetings were formal, scheduled well in advance. Others were whispered, urgent, held in corridors or private offices to avoid leaks. Every interaction carried the weight of consequence, for it was understood that the end result could alter the structure of the monarchy itself. One source described a tense scene in one of the private chambers, aides nervously standing outside, hearing raised voices inside, unsure whether arguments were personal, legal, or strategic. Discussions ranged from Harry's public statements to Meghan's perceived influence to potential global fallout. Decisions that seemed small at the time, how to frame a press release, which advisors to involve, how to prepare the king, were now revealed to be crucial pieces in a much larger, intricate plan. And for those present, the stakes were enormous. They were managing not just a family conflict, but a story with global consequences. Some insiders suggest that the secret meetings weren't just about Harry. They were about the monarchy's future. Charles, it is said, consulted a close circle of senior advisors to weigh every potential scenario. Could Harry accept the decision quietly, or would he fight back publicly? Would media coverage escalate tensions or serve to justify the king's move? Could allies outside the palace, friends, journalists, or global influencers, be enlisted or managed to control the narrative? Each question required foresight, diplomacy, and precision. Every decision had to be made knowing that one leak could ignite international scrutiny and potentially destabilize the family. But the intrigue didn't stop with advisors. Family members reportedly played a role, directly or indirectly, in shaping Charles's decision. Sources hint at private conversations with William, who allegedly expressed concerns about Harry's public actions and their impact on the institution. Some suggest that William's counsel may have been influential, quietly framing the decision as necessary to preserve family cohesion and protect the monarchy's public image. Others, however, point to disagreements even among siblings, hinting at subtle tension behind the carefully curated public appearances. Did William truly support the move, or was he simply managing his own position in a family drama spiraling out of control? One particularly intriguing thread involves senior courtiers, some of whom have decades of experience within the royal household. These advisors are adept at reading the room, predicting public reaction, and managing both family dynamics and the media. According to sources, several of these courtiers were tasked with monitoring Harry and Meghan's public communications, reporting back to the king in real time. Every interview, every social media post, every appearance was analyzed. Patterns were noted, risks evaluated, and strategies proposed. The decision to act was not spontaneous. It was the culmination of extensive intelligence gathering, careful planning, and continuous assessment of both risk and optics. The meetings themselves were reportedly heated at times. Legal advisors argued over the precise wording of the decree, worrying that overly harsh language could provoke legal challenges. Security officials debated how the removal of titles would affect protective measures for Harry and Meghan. Communications teams strategized on how to present the story to the public without sparking outrage. Even the king himself, according to insiders, engaged in lengthy debates over whether a public announcement was necessary or whether the matter could have been handled privately. Every perspective was considered, every risk measured, yet the final decision reflected a combination of authority, urgency, and personal judgment. And there were whispers of tension within the palace that went beyond Harry and Meghan. Some aides reportedly felt caught in the middle, unsure whether their loyalty was to the king, the institution, or to Harry himself. Allegiances shifted subtly, with individuals quietly advocating for different outcomes or attempting to mediate conflicts. One insider claimed that courtiers sometimes found themselves debating in hallways whether public perception could be managed or whether it would inevitably spiral into scandal. It was a precarious dance, a high-stakes chess game where every move had consequences. Adding another layer of complexity, reports suggest that external influencers may have played a subtle role. Lawyers, media consultants, and even former royal staff may have offered strategic advice, framing the king's options in ways that balanced both authority and public opinion. Did these outside voices reinforce the decision, or were they manipulating circumstances to suit their own perspectives? The palace, always a place of secrecy and strategy, became a web of intrigue where intentions were not always clear and motives were often hidden behind layers of protocol and decorum. Even the timing of meetings appears to have been carefully orchestrated. According to reports, discussions were deliberately scheduled around significant events, charity announcements, public tours, and high-profile interviews to control potential leaks and maintain an appearance of normalcy. This timing allowed the palace to prepare both the narrative and the legal framework, ensuring that when the decision became public, it would appear both deliberate and justified. And yet, despite all this planning, insiders acknowledge that even the most meticulously arranged meetings cannot fully contain human emotion, especially when it involves family, pride, and public perception. Perhaps most telling are the alleged private conversations between the king and his closest advisors in the final days leading up to the announcement. Sources hint at heated debates over phrasing, the involvement of Meghan, the potential for Harry to challenge the decision publicly, and the long-term implications for the monarchy. Some advisors reportedly urged caution, fearing that a public stripping of titles could alienate not just Harry but the global audience. Others insisted that delay would be perceived as weakness. In the end, the decision was made, a combination of legal authority, personal judgment, and strategic necessity. And yet, even as these meetings concluded and the plan was executed, the story was far from over. Rumors quickly spread of further private gatherings, conversations with external consultants, and emergency calls between palace officials. Was this truly the final word on Harry's status, or were additional maneuvers still in motion, designed to anticipate and neutralize possible backlash? Sources suggest that no single action occurs in isolation within the palace. Every announcement, every memo, every conversation is part of a larger strategy, a carefully orchestrated symphony of authority, loyalty, and optics. What makes this chapter of events even more fascinating is the possibility that some of the most critical meetings may never be disclosed. Letters, emails, and private correspondences hint at a level of intrigue that the public will never see. Were there warnings, ultimatums, or negotiations behind closed doors? Did Harry have an opportunity to influence outcomes, or was he entirely excluded from these strategic discussions? The answers remain unclear, but they suggest that the palace operates on multiple layers of secrecy, each with its own logic and consequences. And just when it seemed that all the planning, debates, and strategies had run their course, insiders hint at a new twist. A late-night meeting, reportedly unplanned, urgent, and highly confidential, took place between the king, senior advisors, and a small number of legal experts. The contents are unknown, but sources suggest it may have sealed the final terms of Harry's removal. What was discussed in that room? Did the king reconsider, or was the final blow delivered? And most importantly, what was the immediate reaction of those present, and how would that reaction ripple outward in ways no one yet anticipated? Because while the public sees the headlines, the drama inside Buckingham Palace tells a far more intricate story. One of secrecy, strategy, and subtle power plays. The secret meetings, the whispered debates, and the careful orchestration of timing all point to a monarchy that is simultaneously disciplined, vulnerable, and capable of unprecedented decisiveness. And as the next chapter unfolds, the consequences of these behind-the-scenes maneuvers will become even clearer, revealing the intricate web